on white judge finds black woman, only to learn she's a policy researcher. Part 1. The courtroom fell silent as Judge William Bennett looked down at his papers. He was 65 years old with thick gray hair and cold blue eyes. For 30 years, he had been a judge in Fairview, a town where most people knew each other. Judge Bennett looked at the woman standing before him. Her name was Lucy Thompson. She was 34 years old, wore a simple dark blue suit, and had a calm, steady gaze. "Miss Thompson, this is your third parking ticket near the community center," he said in a stern voice. "The fine is £250. Lucy stood tall. "Your Honor, I understand I broke the rule, but may I please explain why?" The courtroom was quiet. Everyone was watching. Some people knew Lucy from around town, but most didn't know that she had spent the last 5 years studying town rules and how they affected different people. Judge Bennett frowned. He didn't like when people tried to make excuses. "Rules are rules, Miss Thompson. You cannot park there no matter what your reason is." Lucy took a deep breath. "Sir, I was helping an elderly woman with her groceries. She needed to get to the food bank inside the center. There was nowhere else to park." The judge shook his head. "That doesn't change anything. The parking rules are there for everyone. The fine stands. Pay by next Friday." Lucy tried to speak again, but the judge raised his hand to stop her. "Next case," he called out, already looking at his next paper. As Lucy walked out of the courtroom, she felt a mix of anger and sadness. This wasn't just about her ticket. It was about all the people who couldn't afford such high fines but needed to use the community center for important things like food, healthcare, and job help. What Judge Bennett didn't know was that Lucy wasn't just any woman from town. She was Dr. Lucy Thompson, who had studied these very rules for years. She had numbers and facts that showed how these rules hurt the poorest people in town the most. Lucy walked slowly through town, thinking about all the faces she had seen at the community center. There was old Mrs. Parker, who could barely walk, but came for her weekly health check. There was Tom, a single father who brought his children to the free after-school program while he took computer classes. And there was Edith, who at 78 years old was learning to read. All these people had gotten parking tickets too. For some of them, a fine of £250 meant not having enough money for food or heat that month. As Lucy reached her small office at the local university, she made up her mind. She would find a way to make Judge Bennett and the town council understand. This wasn't about breaking rules. It was about making rules that worked for everyone, not just those with money and power. Lucy sat down at her desk and opened her laptop. There was a big town meeting coming up next week. Important people would be there, including Judge Bennett. Lucy had been asked to speak about her research. "Maybe this is my chance," she said to herself as she began to prepare what she would say. Outside her window, rain started to fall on the quiet town of Fairview. Lucy didn't know it yet, but the coming days would change everything. For her, for Judge Bennett, and for the whole town. Part 2. 3 days later, Judge Bennett arrived at the annual town leadership conference. It was held in the grand hall of the old town hall with its high ceilings and wooden panels. He had been coming to this event for 25 years. Judge Bennett took his usual seat in the back row. He liked to watch everyone, but didn't care much for talking. He opened the program booklet and looked through the list of speakers. His coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth when he saw a familiar name. Main speaker, Dr. Lucy Thompson, Making Town Rules Fair for Everyone, a 5-year study. "Dr. Thompson?" He mumbled to himself. Surely not the same woman. When Lucy walked onto the stage, Judge Bennett nearly dropped his cup. It was indeed the same woman he had fined just days ago. She wore the same simple blue suit, but now she carried herself with even more confidence. "Good morning, everyone," Lucy began. "Thank you for coming today. I'm here to talk about how some of our town rules affect different people in different ways." Judge Bennett sat up straighter. He had never imagined that the woman he had dismissed so quickly was actually a researcher. Lucy showed pictures on a big screen. There were charts with numbers and graphs with lines going up and down. But most importantly, there were pictures of real people from town. "This is Mrs. Baker," Lucy said, showing a picture of an old woman with a kind face. She's 82 years old and needs to visit the doctor at the community center twice a week. She has gotten 5 parking tickets this year. Lucy clicked to the next picture. This is the Harris family. They have 3 children who use the after-school program, while both parents take classes to get better jobs. They've received 8 tickets. Judge Bennett felt his face grow warm. He remembered seeing these same people in his courtroom. He had never asked why they were parking there. He had just given them fines. Our research shows that in areas with poor bus service, like around the community center, people get 65% more tickets just for trying to access basic services, Lucy explained. Her voice was calm but strong. She wasn't angry. She was simply showing the truth with numbers and stories. For many of these people, a fine of £250 means choosing between paying it or buying food that week, she said. Judge Bennett felt a strange feeling in his chest. It was something he hadn't felt in a long time, doubt about whether he was doing the right thing. After the talk, people gathered around Lucy to ask questions. Judge Bennett stood back, watching. He had never seen the town council members listen so carefully to anyone before. Later that evening, Judge Bennett couldn't sleep. He kept seeing the faces from Lucy's presentation. He got out of bed and went to his home office. He turned on his computer and searched for Dr. Lucy Thompson research. The screen filled with articles and papers she had written. She had studied town rules for 5 years. She had numbers and facts that couldn't be ignored. Judge Bennett read until the sun came up. With each page, he felt the weight of all his quick judgments over the years. How many people had he fined without understanding their situations? How many had suffered because he hadn't taken the time to listen? As morning light filled his room, Judge Bennett made a decision. He picked up the phone and dialed the university where Dr. Thompson worked. "This is Judge William Bennett," he said when someone answered. "I need to speak with Dr. Lucy Thompson. It's important." Part 3, the next morning. Lucy Thompson sat at her desk sorting through papers. Her phone rang with a call from the university front desk. "Dr. Thompson, there's a Judge Bennett on the line for you," said the receptionist, sounding surprised. Lucy's heart beat faster. She hadn't expected this. Taking a deep breath, she picked up the phone. "This is Dr. Thompson," she said calmly. "Dr. Thompson, this is Judge William Bennett," came the familiar voice. "I was at your presentation yesterday. I wonder if we might meet to discuss your research further." Lucy was quiet for a moment. Was this the same stern judge who wouldn't listen to her just days ago? "Of course, Judge Bennett. When would you like to meet?" she asked. They agreed to meet that afternoon at a small cafe away from both the courthouse and the university. A neutral place. At 2 o'clock, Lucy walked into the Morning Cup Cafe. Judge Bennett was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of tea. He looked different outside his black robes, smaller somehow, and older. "Thank you for coming, Dr. Thompson," he said, standing up as she approached. "Thank you for calling," she replied, sitting down across from him. For a moment, neither spoke. The judge looked down at his tea. "I've been reading your research," he finally said. "I stayed up all night going through your papers." Lucy waited, letting him find his words. "I've been a judge for 30 years, he continued. "I always thought justice meant treating everyone exactly the same way. Same rules, same fines, no exceptions." He paused. "But your research shows that equal treatment doesn't always mean fair treatment, does it?" Lucy shook her head. "No, it doesn't. When people start from different places in life, the same rule can hurt some much more than others." Judge Bennett nodded slowly. "Like Mrs. Baker. I've fined her 3 times this year. I never knew she was going to medical appointments." "She has heart problems," Lucy explained. "She can't walk far and there's no bus that goes directly to the center. She parks in the loading zone because it's the closest spot to the door." The judge's face showed pain. "And each time I fined her, it was money she needed for medicine." Lucy reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. "I brought some more stories I think you should see." For the next hour, Judge Bennett read about people who used the community center, the young father learning to read so he could get a better job, The children who got free meals there, the elderly who came for company as much as for services. When he looked up, there were tears in his eyes. "I've been so blind," he whispered. "All these years I thought I was upholding the law, but what good is law if it hurts the people it's meant to protect?" Lucy saw something change in the judge's face. The stern lines softened, the cold eyes warmed. "What can I do?" he asked. "How can I make this right?" Lucy smiled for the first time. "Actually, I have some ideas, but it will mean working together. It will mean changing how things have been done for a long time." Judge Bennett straightened his shoulders. "I'm 75 years old, Dr. Thompson. Some might say that's too old to change, but I think it's just in time to learn something new." They talked until the cafe closed, making plans that would change, not just parking rules, but how justice worked in their town. As they walked out into the evening air, Judge Bennett turned to Lucy. "I never thought I'd say this, but thank you for getting those parking tickets, Dr. Thompson." Lucy laughed. "I never thought I'd say this, but thank you for finding me, Judge Bennett." The end part. For a month after their cafe meeting, Lucy and Judge Bennett sat together in the town hall meeting room. Around them were stacks of papers, open laptops, and empty coffee cups. They had been working together every Tuesday and Thursday for weeks. "I think we're ready," Lucy said, looking at their final proposal. Judge Bennett nodded. His face looked younger somehow, despite the late nights of work. "The town council meets tomorrow. Are you nervous?" Lucy smiled. "A little. Change is never easy, especially in a town like ours." They had created a new plan called Fair Access Rules. Instead of the same parking rules for everyone, they suggested different options for different needs. People going to medical appointments could get special passes. There would be a sliding scale for fines based on what people could pay, and most importantly, there would be more buses going to the community center. The next day, the town council room was full. People sat in every chair, and more stood along the walls. Judge Bennett and Lucy sat side by side at the front table. Mayor Peter Thomas looked surprised to see them together. "We will now hear the proposal from Judge Bennett and Dr. Thompson," he announced. When Judge Bennett stood up, a hush fell over the room. Everyone knew him as the strictest judge in town. What was he doing here with Dr. Thompson? "For 30 years I have served this town as a judge," he began. "I believed justice meant treating everyone exactly the same way, but I was wrong." People began to whisper. Judge Bennett never admitted being wrong about anything. "Dr. Thompson's research opened my eyes," he continued. "When we treat everyone the same without considering their different needs and challenges, we aren't being fair at all." He told the story of Mrs. Baker and her heart condition. He talked about the young families who needed the community center's services. With each story, the room grew quieter. "Today we're proposing a new way," he said, and then stepped aside for Lucy to explain their plan. Lucy went through each part of their proposal. As she spoke, she could see some council members nodding, while others frowned and shook their heads. When they finished, Mayor Thomas opened the floor for questions. Hands shot up across the room. "This will cost too much money," said one council member. "How will police know who has special passes?" asked another. "Why should some people pay less for breaking the same rule?" demanded a third. Lucy and Judge Bennett answered each question calmly. They had expected pushback. Change never came easily. Then, from the back of the room, a small voice spoke up. "May I say something?" Everyone turned to see Mrs. Baker, the elderly woman with heart problems, slowly standing up. "I've lived in this town for 60 years, she said in a shaky but clear voice. "Last month I had to choose between paying my parking fine and buying my heart medicine. I paid the fine because I was afraid of what would happen if I didn't. Then I got sick because I didn't have my medicine." The room was completely silent now. "All I want is to be able to see my doctor without worrying about a fine I can't afford," she finished. After Mrs. Baker, others began to stand and share their stories too. A young father talked about missing job training because of parking troubles. A teacher explained how children missed free meals when their parents couldn't park near the center. By the end of the meeting, even the doubtful council members were nodding thoughtfully. Mayor Thomas called for a vote on whether to try the new plan for 6 months. The vote was 7-2 in favor. As people filed out of the room, many stopped to thank Lucy and Judge Bennett. Mrs. Baker hugged them both, tears in her eyes. "This is just the beginning," Judge Bennett said to Lucy as they gathered their papers. "There are so many other rules we need to look at now." Lucy nodded. "One step at a time, Judge. One step at a time." The End, Part 5. 6 months later, a large crowd gathered outside the community center. A bright blue ribbon stretched across the newly painted entrance. Judge Bennett and Lucy stood side by side, both holding large scissors. "Today marks a new chapter for our town," Mayor Thomas announced to the crowd. "Thanks to the Fair Access program created by Judge Bennett and Dr. Thompson, our community center is now truly accessible to everyone." The changes went far beyond just parking rules. The center now had a small bus that ran every hour from different parts of town. There were special parking spots for people with medical needs, and most importantly, the fines for rule breaking were now based on what people could afford to pay. "It's time to cut the ribbon," the mayor said, nodding to Lucy and Judge Bennett. Together, they cut the blue ribbon. The crowd clapped and cheered. After the ceremony, people enjoyed cake and tea in the community center garden. Lucy watched as Judge Bennett talked with Mrs. Baker, both of them laughing about something. "You've changed him," said a voice beside her. Lucy turned to see Mary, the center's director. "We changed each other," Lucy replied. Judge Bennett was different now. He still wore his black robes in court, but he listened more. He asked questions before making decisions. And sometimes he even changed the rules when they didn't make sense. Lucy's work had changed too. She no longer just wrote papers that few people read. Now she worked directly with the town council to check if rules were fair for everyone. As the party was ending, Judge Bennett walked over to Lucy. He held a small box wrapped in blue paper. "For you," he said, handing it to her. "A small thank you." Lucy opened the box. Inside was a small silver key. "What's this for?" she asked. "It's the key to the courthouse library," Judge Bennett explained. "I want you to have an office there. We need your voice where the rules are made, not just when they're broken." Lucy felt tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Judge Bennett looked around at the happy people enjoying the community center. "You know what the strangest part is," he said. "I've been a judge for 30 years, but I never really understood justice until now." A year later, other towns began to notice the changes in Fairview. Crime was down. More people were getting education and health care. The community was stronger. Visitors came to learn about the Fairview model. Lucy and Judge Bennett traveled to nearby towns to share what they had learned. On a cold winter evening, they sat in Judge Bennett's office reviewing the first full year of data. "Look at this," Lucy said, pointing to a chart. "Parking fines are down by 70%, but proper use of the center is up by 50%. Judge Bennett nodded. "When rules make sense, people follow them." As they worked, a knock came at the door. It was Mrs. Baker, bringing them hot chocolate. "Just wanted to say thank you again," she said. "My doctor says my heart is stronger than it's been in years." After she left, Judge Bennett looked at Lucy. "You know, I used to think my job was to enforce the rules. Now I know my real job is to make sure the rules help people live better lives." Lucy smiled. "That sounds like justice to me." Outside, snow began to fall on the town of Fairview. It covered the old buildings and the new bus stops, the community center and the courthouse. From above, it all looked perfect, peaceful, and most importantly, fair. The ends.